Hey folks, how we doing today? If you haven't heard the news, God bless you. I'm not gonna jump into it today. I just don't have it in me. But what I do have in me is chapter 2. So let's go right into there and just read together for a little while. Chapter 2, Rage. Right after the election, Rex Tillerson, the longtime CEO of ExxonMobil, received phone messages from Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner. Tillerson, who had run the largest publicly traded oil and gas company in the world for nearly 11 years, was the embodiment of big oil. A Texan with a smooth voice and easy laugh, he was a highly disciplined rider and breeder of cutting horses on his 83-acre ranch near Dallas. He ignored their calls. Then Vice President-elect Pence called Tillerson, decided to take the call. The president-elect's been told you know a lot of world leaders, Pence said, and you know a lot about the current situations around the world. Would you be willing to come up and give him a briefing? I'll be happy to do that, Tillerson said. He often briefed presidents, but he wasn't keen on making a highly visible walk through the lobby of Trump Tower. I'm not going to come through those front doors by those gilded elevators and do the press walk. Pence promised they would slip him in discreetly. Tillerson, 64, arrived at Trump Tower on December 6th and rode up on the private elevator. With a swept-back mane of gray hair and a big Texas drawl, he stood out. Bannon and the designated White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus, I forgot that man even existed. Reince Priebus. Wonder what happened to him. Have to Google that later. Greeted and escorted him into a side conference room. You're not a never-Trumper, are you? Priebus asked. Tillerson wasn't absolutely sure what that was, but got the idea and said no. Have you ever said anything negative about the president-elect? Bannon asked. Not that I recall, Steve. We noticed you didn't contribute anything. I don't do political contributions, Tillerson replied, trying to sidestep the question. I found it's not particularly healthy in the job I'm in. He was a lifelong Republican. His wife, Renda, had paid $2,500 to go to a Trump lunch. Records show Tillerson made more than $100,000 in contributions in the 2016 election cycle, including $2,700 to Trump's competitor Jeb Bush. Since 2000, he's made more than $400,000 in contributions. Did you vote in the election? Yes. Who'd you vote for? I voted for President-elect Trump. Okay, let's go in and see him. Tillerson found the political vetting heavy-handed and slightly weird. Trump was sitting at his desk and rose to greet his visitor. Trump had been such a dominant television presence that to see him in person was a little jarring. Campaign material, stuffed animals and hats littered the office. Disneyland, Tillerson thought. Everyone sat down. Jared Kushner joined them. So tell me what's going on around the world, Trump asked. We've been dealt a really difficult hand in foreign affairs, Tillerson said. As Exxon CEO, he traveled the world and met with heads of state. I've been listening to those world leaders for the last 8 years during the Obama presidency. The challenges now are as serious as any president has faced in my lifetime. Tillerson said his closest relationship was with Russian President Vladimir Putin, whom he visited regularly. Oil and gas amounted to over 60% of Russia's exports, and Russia was Exxon's biggest oil exploration area in the world, with holdings of more than 60 million acres. Exxon had a 30% interest in a Russian production sharing agreement that produced oil and gas from fields in the Russian Far East. Exxon also had 7.5% ownership of a pipeline that transported oil from Kazakhstan to a Russian port on the Black Sea. Let me tell you a story, Tillerson said, about a meeting with Putin 2 years before the U.S. presidential election. We were down in Sochi having a lunch, and I would always just try to ask questions to Putin and let him do the talking, Tillerson said. It was not hard to get the Russian president to speak openly, given Putin's interest in the energy markets and new technologies. Well, Putin said, I've given up on your President Obama. He doesn't do anything he says he's going to do. I can't deal with someone who won't follow through on his promises. I'll wait for your next president. Tillerson said Putin looked directly at him, adding, I know when that is. Seeing Trump had visibly perked up at the mention of Putin. Tillerson described an earlier conversation when Putin had said he disagreed with Obama's decision in 2011 to intervene in the Libyan civil war, which resulted in the gruesome death of Libyan leader Muhammad al-Gaddafi and the widespread upheaval and civil war it unleashed. Putin said he had warned Obama. I said to Obama, I understand you don't like Gaddafi, but what comes after him? He couldn't answer that, so I told him, well, until you can answer that, you shouldn't go in. Tillerson quoted Putin. The issue came before the United Nations Security Council. Tillerson continued. Putin could have blocked it, and Putin told me, I called Obama. I told him I'm going to abstain for you. So Putin, I think, was trying to say to me, I was trying to work with this guy. So fast forward to Syria. Tillerson continued, and when Obama drew the red line over the use of chemicals, Putin and Obama talked again. And Putin said, okay, I understand if you think you have to respond to that, but I'm not going to allow you to make the same mistake in Syria that you made in Libya, because I have a stake in Syria. So let's understand one another. That's what Putin told me he said to Obama. So somewhere in the midst of that, Putin came to the conclusion that this guy's never going to fix anything. All he does is make it worse. Now Libya had turned into a mess, Tillerson said to Trump. The question you always have to ask yourself is, do you know what's going to come next? And of course, we know that Libyan revolution helped ISIS. All the bad guys that formed ISIS, Muammar Gaddafi, had them locked up in his prison. Tillerson added, Putin felt like we treat Russia like a banana republic. The year before, Tillerson said he had been tooling around the Black Sea on Putin's yacht, and he said to me, you need to remember we're nuclear power, as powerful as you. You Americans think you won the Cold War. You did not win the Cold War. You never fought that war. We could have, but we didn't. And that put chills up my spine. There is a significant opportunity here, Tillerson said. When Putin said the breakup of the Soviet Union was the greatest tragedy of the 20th century, it wasn't because he loved communism. It's because Russia's structure had been destroyed. Anybody who tries to think about Russia in terms of the Soviet era doesn't know a thing about Russia. The 70 years of Soviet rule was a speed bump in Russian history, and it has no lasting effect. If you want to understand Russia, they haven't changed much culturally in 1,000 years. They are the most fatalistic people on the face of the earth, which is why they're willing to live under lousy leaders. If you ask them about it, they'd say they don't like it, but they'd say, Das Russia. They'd shrug their shoulders. I would talk to my Russian employees about it. Only one time did Russians rise up in revolution, and that didn't turn out so well. So they look back on that and they say, don't do that again. Bottom line, said Tillerson, you can deal with Putin. Obama was never able to. There is just a fundamental dislike of one another. Putin is a terrible racist, as we all know. All Russians are generally, and Obama had a terrible disdain for Putin. Putin has a goal for Russia, Tillerson said. They want recognition of their role in the global order, and Putin wants respect as a leader of a great country. We've never been willing to give him either. Now they view their role in the global world order as equivalent to ours. That's what they seek. Trump seemed rapt at all this first-hand information about Putin. Tillerson turned to Asia. China is a different challenge for you. On one hand, China's rise, their economy, the lifting of 500 million people out of poverty to middle-class status, all of the economic benefit to the rest of the world, those are all good things. But China has gone too far in the South China Sea with the island building. For years, the Chinese had been building military bases on the islands. They had vastly expanded their footprint by dumping sand and muck, dredging from the ocean on top of the rock and reef formations, building man-made islands in order to set up more bases with an alarming array of military installations in the highly valuable international trade passage that threatened the U.S. Navy's Pacific domination. Other countries in the region, most notably Japan, lay claim to part of the sea. That's going to be your problem, Tillerson said. Also Hong Kong and Taiwan, he said. You're going to have to deal with the conflict with Russia over those. Russia is an immediate challenge to you. China is a long-term challenge. Tillerson continued his round-the-world tour. He talked extensively about the Middle East, where he knew the leaders. He told Trump how some 15 years ago he had been talking to Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, the powerful crown prince of the Emirates. He was a pretty young guy. We were talking in his house, And he says, we don't need nuclear weapons as long as we have friends who have them. The protective nuclear American umbrella was crucial. The United States still had a dominant role in the world, Tillerson told Trump. All the aces are still in the cards on the table. In his view, the 4 aces were military strength, economic strength, democracy, and freedom, but Trump did not ask what they were. Your job is to draw every one of them out with the right politics and tactics, he said, adding confidentially, those aces belong to the United States of America. Ivanka Trump came into the room and Trump introduced her. She sat down and Trump stood up theatrically behind his desk. I really like everything you said, Trump declared to Tillerson. You clearly are a guy that knows the world. You've got these relationships. I'm sure you've been following the press. I've been talking to a lot of people about serving in my cabinet. I've got a lot of people that want some of these high-profile jobs. Uh-oh, Tillerson thought. Here it comes. Perhaps Secretary of Energy, a job that would be really easy to decline. You're the perfect guy to be my Secretary of State, the president-elect said. Tillerson lurched back. You're surprised, said Bannon. Yes, I'm surprised, Tillerson said, though he had, perhaps even unintentionally, pushed all the buttons on Trump's console, especially on the pathway to Putin. Tillerson took a deep breath. I've got a job, he told Trump. But you're going to retire pretty soon, Trump said. He apparently had been prepped that Tillerson was 3 months away from Exxon's mandatory retirement age of 65. His successor had already been picked, and the transition was underway. This is just 3 months early, Trump added. This will be really hard to do, Tillerson said. It will be really hard for you. I would not be an easy person to get confirmed, you know. Chairman and CEO of ExxonMobil. We're not exactly the most loved corporation in the world, adding defensively, undeservedly. I really need you, Trump said. You're the guy. Now Tillerson, like so many before him, was experiencing the almost irresistible call to presidential service. I've got to think this over. I would need to talk to my board, obviously. Look, it's not a simple matter for me, just personally and financially, and my obligations to the ExxonMobil Corporation. 40 years. I don't know if it's doable. He was worth hundreds of millions of dollars and was looking forward to retiring to a horse ranch he and his wife ran. When do you think you could give me an answer? Trump asked. It was now Tuesday, December 6th. I will commit to give you an answer by Friday. I can hold off that long. Tillerson called his wife Renda from the car and said, You're not going to believe what just happened. He asked you to be Secretary of State, she said. Well, how'd you know? I told you God's not through with you. In the car, Tillerson took stock and settled in for the little introspection. He failed to conceal a yearning from Renda? This was a job held by Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Marshall, fourth in line to the presidency. Had he hid his ambition even from himself? What did he really want? Whose interests could he serve? Could he find the proper version of all his obligations? To Renda, Exxon, the country, and now, of all things, Donald Trump. Back home, Renda had some answers. As you've approached retirement, you've become irritable, she said. Subconsciously, she believed. He was worried about that terrible question, what am I going to do? Look, she told him, you've been in training for this for the last 20 years. You're supposed to help this man. He needs your help. You need to go help him. Tillerson thought he'd had every reason in the world not to take the job. If Renda had said all that to him, he believed he would have talked himself out of it. He had not served in the military and always felt uneasy about that. Was this his time to serve his country? For the moment, he had the upper hand. Trump was waiting for his answer, so he called Reince Priebus. I've got 3 questions for the president-elect. Okay, shoot. What are they? Reince, I'm not going to give them to you. I've got to ask them the president of the president face to face. I have to see his answers. Priebus arranged for Tillerson to see Trump at his residence in New York on Saturday. Tillerson, meanwhile, talked to longtime Republican friends who had served as Secretary of State. Condoleezza Rice, 4 years for George W. Bush. James A. Baker III, 3 years for George H.W. Bush. and George Shultz 6 years for Ronald Reagan. He reminded them he was coming from big oil and he did not want to cause a problem for himself or the newly elected president. They were public service mavens. The advice was unanimous. You must do it. When the president asks if it is in the realm of possibility and if it is legal, you respond with a yes. Tillerson visited Trump at his residence in private. I want the freedom to pick my own people, he asked the president-elect. I understand if there's something that's just highly objectionable to you, Tillerson said in the end. It was the president's decision and responsibility to nominate someone, but I hope I'll have the freedom to put the team together that I feel I'll need to help you. Done, Trump said. The second question, I want your assurance that when we get into this, you will never withdraw my nomination because I'm going to be a very difficult confirmation. He was aware that presidents often folded when controversy hit. The big oil executive would inevitably draw fire, and I don't want you spending any of your political capital on me. I'll get this done myself or I won't get it done. And if they vote me down, it's not the end of my life. I'll go home and pick up where I left off. You've got to assure me you won't give up and give in. Okay, Trump said. They're going to confirm you. It's not going to be a big deal. Don't even worry about it. Third, Tillerson said, I want you to promise me that we are never going to have a public dispute because that doesn't serve anyone. In the New York real estate world, Trump had built a decades-long reputation for disparaging former business and romantic partners in the tabloid press after relationships turned sour. If you're unhappy with me, call me and ream my ass out, Tillerson said. It's all behind closed doors because when I walk out that door, I serve you and the American people. I will not disparage anybody. It's just not my nature. Don't worry, Trump said. We're going to get along splendidly. All right, folks. There's chapter 2. Tomorrow's chapter 3. I wish I had some amazing titles for you here, but, Woodward was a little stingy with the chapter titles on this one. I guess 3 is just going to have to be enough. Anyway, all right, everybody. Stay sane out there. God help me, but avoid the news. And I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye.